gonna give me orders? Outstanding.
The next challenge should be...
No more stupid challenge ideas. No more fun facts. I want to start fresh. Play normally. The Dig gives me siege tanks. I'm using siege tanks. Haven gives me Vikings. I'm using Vikings. Char gives me... okay, let me just rewrite the rules real quick. The rules are simple. Only use the units or heroes introduced in each mission to fight. For example, Goliaths for Welcome to the Jungle. SEVs are allowed, obviously. If a mission does not introduce any new units, build only the units that you start with. For example, Marine Marauder Medic Tank for Gates of Hell. Mercenaries of said units are also allowed. If a mission introduces non-combat units, then only use combat units that are given in the mission. For example, Mercs on Moebius Factor. Missile turrets and photon cannons are allowed on missions that don't introduce an anti-air unit. For added challenge, I'll hold off on any campaign-only upgrades, so no orbital command or fortified bunkers, unless I really need them. The run will be done on brutal difficulty, because B comes first in the alphabet. The mission introduces Marines. They're standard shooty guys who can hit both air and ground units and serve as a good all-around infantry unit that can solo the entire campaign on its own. But the rules say no more Marines until Moebius Factor and Char. Since Raynor is also introduced in this mission, all future missions with Raynor will either be skipped or done without Raynor. Otherwise, the mission's pretty straightforward. Keep Raynor alive and destroy the tower. The Outlaws introduces SEVs and medics. SEVs harvest resources and repair, and medics heal. You may notice that neither is particularly good at sending enemies to the afterlife. I try to go SEV medic, but quickly lower the difficulty to hard. Normal! I had to lower it to normal. Going full communist, I spam command centers to produce a horde of workers. The biggest problem with using SEVs to fight is that they prioritize repairing over fighting, so I have to manually surround and focus down each enemy. Despite heavy losses, the revolution destroys the mine site, and the mission ends. 0 Hour only gives me bunkers. While I could try to pull a pacifist run and stall until time runs out, such a strat isn't viable on brutal or hard, so I lower the difficulty to normal. Don't worry, I'll stick to brutal for the rest of the run, hopefully. I suppose bunkers could be counted as a new non-combat unit, so I limit myself to my starting Marines and the stranded rebels, holding for 20 minutes and ending the mission. The Evacuation introduces fire bats, flamethrower-wielding juggernauts that are excellent at fighting groups of zerglings and zealots. The downside is that they're slow and can't shoot up, so naturally this is a mission that requires me to run around and fight multiple air units. Now, given that the Hyperion is a thing, I'm surprised that Raynor doesn't just land it at the colony base to save time, but as a noob, it's not my place to question evacuation strategies for an alien invasion. Initially, I try to use the bunkers along the road, but bunkers suck, so I stick to giving my firebats cardio. While most of my army is overrun, eventually I get all the colonists out, and the mission ends. Smash and Grab introduces Marauders, grenade-launching juggernauts that kaboom armored targets, but suck against masses of light units, and they also can't shoot up. As per rule number 4, I can use missile turrets to defend my base for this mission. Given that Raynor has the Hyperion, it's a wonder he doesn't just drop on top of the artifact to save time, but as a noob, it's not my place to question strategy during an alien invasion. With Mass Marauder, I kaboom stalkers, photon cannons, and sentries. I do have to deal with a void ray outside the main base, but turrets deal with it easily.
But Pi, I thought you could only use turrets to defend.
I am defending.
Defending what?
My dignity. Anywho, my stream of marauders blow up the enemy base and demolish the stone zealots. The Devil's Playground introduces Reapers, jetpack-wearing, gun-toting scouts that excel at harassment. Since they still can't shoot up, I build turrets at home and let the Zerg attack first before raiding their hives. With Reapers scattered around the map, I build up a large enough force of raiders. While I can't deal with the Mutalisks in the east, I'm able to steal enough minerals from the Zerg, and the mission ends. The Great Train Robbery introduces Diamondbacks, hover tanks with railguns that can fire on the move. Their biggest downsides are that they're expensive and supply heavy, but as with Devil's Playground, they're scattered around the map and thus easy to mass. Zooming around the map, my Diamondbacks easily deal with the bunkers and escorts protecting the trains. To deal with the Banshees and Ravens, I use my expert tactic of ignoring my problems, allowing me to finish off the trains, ending the mission. Outbreak introduces Hellions.
Pi, don't you start with different units?
This is always how the mission starts. It's not like I have to wait several minutes through night 1 just to get access to Hellions. Anywho, Hellions are flamethrower-wielding bikes that excel at harassment. The downside is that they're fairly frail, so naturally I get them on a mission that requires me to defend my base for long periods of time. Nevertheless, with 3 factories and reactors, I build up 3 packs of Hellions that not only fend off night attacks, but also blaze through infested areas, ending the mission. Welcome to the Jungle introduces Goliaths, mech suits that kaboom air units but suck against ground targets. They're generally good with infantry and tank support, but this is the Noob challenge and I don't have time for silly little things like unit composition or sound tactics. Using my expert tactic of waiting as long as possible, I concentrate a sufficient force of mechs to push to each altar. Eventually I get enough gas, and the mission ends. Cutthroat introduces vultures, hoverbikes that once again excel at harassment and can lay explosive mines. They still can't shoot air though. They're cheap to build but easy to destroy. They're generally good as an auxiliary force but not as your main army. But as a noob, I can't afford to spend limited brain cells on more than one control group, so mass vulture it is. Since the enemy sends ravens and siege tanks later in the mission, I rush out vultures as soon as possible and pick off Orlan's forces one by one. And for 6,000 minerals, I get nothing! I'm left in a weakened state after paying off Mira since I just wasted 6,000 minerals to get an army I can't actually use, right after sacrificing my vultures to meet the contract. So I'm forced to rush my rearmament, maxing out on vultures and swarming Orlan's base. To deal with the enemy BC, I use my expert tactic of ignoring my problems, focusing down the planetary fortress, and ending the mission. The Dig introduces siege tanks.
Pi, what about the start of the mission? You only get old units.
That is strange. My scanners don't detect any old units at all. Maybe you have a technical problem with your equipment.
Pi?
I'm sorry, sir, but it seems your signal's fading out. I couldn't quite make out that last part. I'll try to re-establish contact later. Anywho, siege tanks are capable of serving as artillery pieces to fortify positions. They're generally best with infantry and anti-air support, but as a noob, diversity is overrated. Since I also get access to the laser drill, I won't need turrets for this mission. The laser drill itself is somehow capable of burning through an ancient alien temple and burning advanced alien warships. Must be Australian. Using my expert tactic of spamming siege tanks and lasering my enemies, I hold until the temple falls. Whispers of Doom introduces Stalkers and Zeratul. Stalkers are yet again more units that excel at harassment and can teleport short distances but are weak against masses of small enemies. The mission is pretty standard. Use Zeratul to stun Ultras, Overseers, and Broodlords, focus fire enemies with the Stalkers, and escape. And now, a mission that actually gives me more than one unit. Hooray diversity. A Sinister Turn introduces the Zealot, High Templar, Dark Templar, Archon, and Immortal. Zealots are tanky frontline warriors and are the only unit I can immediately build. To defend my base against the initial attacks, I rush out my charging boys before quickly taking the nearby Dark Shrine and robotics facility, giving me access to invisible Dark Templar and tanky anti-armor Immortals. Dark Templar can also merge into Archons, giving me access to tanky anti-air units. With my roided out army, I focus down the hybrid each time it attacks. Eventually, I take the base to the east, reclaiming a Templar archives and giving me access to Zappy High Templar. Now normally, I could use its feedback ability to burn out the hybrid's energy, but as a noob, micro is hard, so I stick with my expert tactic of A-moving instead. Eventually, I free the Preservers, and the mission ends. As stated at the start, Moebius Factor is one of 2 missions that give new units that can't actually fight. So as per rule number 2, I'll limit myself to only units that are given to me during the mission. Wait, if the artifact data is all digital, why doesn't Terran just, use the delete button for all his files? Or just, nuke the buildings from orbit? Anywho, it's the noob challenge, no time to question it. I get Medifacts, transports that heal. This allows me to quickly build up a squad of elite units, though I have to be careful not to stay on offense too long since I don't actually have any defenders at home. Using the expert tactic of lifting my buildings to stall while my force clears a path to the final data core, I managed to bring it down before the last of my army is overrun. Now I could have done Haven's Fall, but as a noob, I don't like fighting Brute Lords, and Skytoss isn't actually that bad in this mission. Anywho, I get access to the Viking, a mech that can switch between fighter and walker modes. Though, let's be real, no one uses the ground mode for obvious reasons. Anywho, I have to destroy 3 Nexi around the map, which are powering the Purifier. Now, why the Protoss need to have shield generators outside the Purifier, or even on the planet they're currently destroying, is beyond me. But as a noob, it's not my place to question tactical decisions regarding the destruction of an alien pandemic. The Purifier lumbers over and falls in a few volleys, ending the mission. Breakout is pretty straightforward since I only get Tosh, a cloaked fighter who can stun enemies and shield himself. Nevertheless, I break open the prison and end the mission. Echoes of the Future only introduces the Observer and the Colossus. Observers are invisible and can detect burrowed units. Colossi can walk up cliffs and excel against masses of light units. The only downside is that they can't shoot up, so as per rule number 4, cannons are allowed to defend my base. Using my observers as spotters, I use my Colossi to burn my enemies from afar. The biggest challenge is getting Zeratul to the 2 northern tendrils, which have at least 1 or more Brood Lords protecting them. So using my expert tactic of ignoring my problems, I use Colossi as a distraction while Zeratul runs into the remaining tendrils, ending the mission. Engine of Destruction introduces Wraiths.
Pi, what about the start of this mission? You only get old units.
That is strange. My scanners don't detect any old units at all. Maybe you have a technical problem with your equipment.
Pi?
I'm sorry, sir, but it seems your signal's fading out. I couldn't quite make out that last part. I'll try to re-establish contact later. Anywho, Wraiths are cloaked fighters that have decent anti-air but do practically nothing to ground targets. They're also super expensive. Now a smart player would use Marines or Vikings for anti-air since they're cheaper and do more damage than Wraiths. But as a noob, I don't have time to use viable unit compositions to beat these missions, so I stick with Mass Wraith. I need to escort the Odin to 5 bases around the map and keep it alive. As it turns out, babysitting Tychus is the biggest headache of this mission, as the Odin, a war machine that's supposedly the final answer to the Zerg threat, is barely capable of answering the question of why it's so bad at staying alive. Using the expert tactic of sacrificing SCVs to repair Tychus, I managed to keep him alive long enough to get a Wraith fleet together to support him. Eventually Tychus takes out the final base, and the mission ends. Media Blitz introduces the Thor and the Odin. Odin is a thick assault mech that kabooms ground units but sucks against air. The Thor is slightly less thick but does a better job of dealing with the sky. The only downsides are that they're slow and expensive. But as Sun Tzu says, if it's slow but strong, it's got big dong.
Pi?
What? Dong, the Vietnamese currency. What did you think I was referring to? Anywho, after blasting through the mech base with the Odin, I turtle until I get a massive Thors and push through each base, hack each tower, and end the mission. Supernova introduces Banshees, cloaked fighters that can bomb targets but can't fight air. I need to destroy a vault before a wave of fire destroys the planet. Now, why Raynor doesn't just drop a force on top of the vault instead of wasting time clearing a path to the vault is beyond me. But as a noob, it's not my place to question mission logic. Anywho, to push, I move to each expansion while slowly building up a force of Banshees. Since there's few air units before the main base, I easily dominate the skies, but eventually the amount of anti-air near the vault becomes too much to fight directly. So I fly around it. Now there are several Phoenixes and Scouts guarding the rear of the vault. Well, as per rule number 4, I can build turrets to defend my base. Now I can't bring the Phoenixes to my base, but I can bring my base to the Phoenixes. After lowering the air units into my defensive turrets, I focus down the cannons and eventually blast the vault open, ending the mission. Maw the Void introduces battlecruisers, powerful capital ships that can kaboom enemies with plasma. They're slow and expensive, but as Sun Tzu says, if it's slow but strong, it's got big dong. Anywho, I build up a fleet of battlecruisers and fly around the Tal'Darim defenses, blasting a path in the south and Yamatoing the vault open. Char is where things get weird. Since none of these missions introduce new units, for the most part, I'll be using Rule 2, where I can only build or rescue starting units. I start the mission with a pretty strong force of Marines, Medics, Marauders, and Siege Tanks. Since my starting perimeter is too spread out, I pull back my bunkers and concentrate my forces. While the early drop pods have Marines and Marauders, I have to let the rest get eaten for the cardinal sin of not being in my starting army. To rescue Warfield, I move my base to the nearby expansion and slow push with my tanks, employing an expert tactic known as the Creeping Barrage. The Creeping Barrage is where you slowly advance with artillery, bombarding the enemy, while infantry follow closely behind. Eventually, I blast through the Nidus Worms, ending the mission. Now, I suppose I could choose Belly of the Beast on account of it introducing Swans, Deadman, and Tychus, but I have a feeling mass Broodlords will be harder to fight than the mass Nidus Worms. Of course, the fact that I have to choose which defense to disable at all demonstrates a clear strategic failure on the part of Dominion High Command. So Warfield's plan was basically dawdle around in orbit and lose 2 of your ships to mass muta, lose most of your army landing in Zerg territory, pray that a notorious outlaw will salvage the invasion and save your behind because you can't pilot your own ship, then return to space to destroy a platform we probably could have attacked in the first place to secure air superiority before landing, and finally attempt to hold the artifact with a severely weakened force. Also, if they were only going to send 4 people into the Nidus network, why not send a strike force to attack the platform at the same time? Whatever. As a noob, it's not my place to question strategic decisions when invading a planet of spiky bugs with half of your military. Anywho, I have a fairly good starting army of Marines, Medics, Banshees, and a battlecruiser. I need to destroy 4 reactors around the map to disable the Zerg Air Force. Reactor 1 is weak to cloaked Banshees, Reactor 2 has weak air defenses, Reactor 3 has weak ground defenses, and Reactor 4 destroyed most of my army. Also, Leviathan.
We could use some help here.
Time for all-in. Oh, for once I don't actually need to purge any of my starting army this time. I have a formidable army of Marines, Marauders, Medics, Siege Tanks, Banshees, and Battlecruisers. After forming a perimeter of bunkers and tanks, I proceed to die to Kerrigan, who's really strong. At a loss, I return to the mission hub. Is there really no way to win without lowering the difficulty? Hey, what's the armory? Anywho, after getting more upgrades for my units, I return, quickly max out, and sit around for half an hour. Whenever Kerrigan attacks, I swarm her with Marines and Banshees. Whenever Nidus Worms pop out, I send my Banshees out to mop them up. Since the artifact is introduced in this mission, I also use it to ease the Zerg pressure off of my base. While my defenses are eventually overrun, I hold until the artifact charges, and the mission ends.
You will pay for this treachery!
So can you? Nope. The Outlaws in 0 Hour only introduce medics, SCVs, and bunkers, so I have to lower the difficulty to beat it without building more Marines. Moebius Factor only gives me medevacs, which can't actually hurt anyone. Inner Darkness is Inner Darkness. Piercing the Shroud only gives me the Ares Warbot. I also need to use Reapers, Ravens, and Siege Tanks to progress in the second area of Ghost of a Chance. And finally, none of the Char missions introduce new units, except the Artifact and the Heroes and Belly of the Beast for me to use. So how many missions could be done using the unit introduced? In total, only 11 out of 29 missions could truly be done with just the unit introduced, excluding workers. If we include missions where I needed to use missile turrets and photon cannons for anti-air, this increases to 17 out of 29. If we include missions where there's a no-build segment that forces me to use units that weren't introduced in the mission but where I can still complete most of the mission with the new unit, this increases to 19 out of 29. If we include missions where I only build or rescue units for my starting army, this increases to 22 out of 29 missions, 76%. Wings of Liberty has the advantage of introducing a new unit in nearly every mission, which results in a diverse arsenal but a bloated tech tree. Remember, Patrician. Shoutouts to Aussie G-Man, Gladys Marino, Happy Acrid, and Scott Replinger. As of this recording, I haven't yet reached 1,000 subs. Shut up past me. We did it. Finally, I got to 1,000 subs. I'm monetized. Money! Oh, there's no revenue yet. Well, anywho, thanks for all the support. I'll make a special thing next week to celebrate. Here, have another poll. Do you want a compilation of memes, animations, or maybe a stupid edit like that Starcraft anime video I made a few years ago? Go, democracy. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and make questionable strategic decisions that somehow end up winning a war.